My stepmother is threatening to destroy my career and plant false evidence of an affair unless I pay her $1,500 by 5 this evening. She is demanding this ransom for a dress she ruined herself after she physically broke into the VIP table at my wedding and humiliated our entire family. I am hiding in my own bathroom, shaking uncontrollably, while my father stands on the other side of the door, begging me to just give her the cash to make the screaming stop. It is not just about the money anymore. It is about the fact that she has hijacked my life and turned my marriage into a hostage negotiation. She swapped the seating charts. She caused the scene. And now she is gaslighting everyone into believing I am the villain who targeted her. I feel like I am losing my mind because everyone is telling me to be the bigger person. But how can I be the bigger person when she is holding a grenade to my reputation? Is this what family is supposed to be? Or am I being abused by a narcissist who knows exactly how to break me? I am terrified that if I pay her, she will never stop coming for more. Please tell me, how do I escape this nightmare without losing everything? My name is Mia Thompson. I am 28 years old, a freelance graphic designer who spends most of her days adjusting color palettes and kerning fonts to perfection. I live in a quiet, leafy suburb of Connecticut, the kind of place where neighbors wave to each other from manicured lawns, and the local homeowners association sends you a polite but firm letter if your trash cans are left out past 6 in the evening. On the surface, I have everything a woman my age is supposed to want. I have a loving fiancé, a thriving career that allows me to work from the comfort of my bay window, and a future that looks as bright and polished as the engagement ring on my finger. But if you look closely, past the filters and the forced smiles, you will see the cracks. You will see that my need for perfection is not a professional strength, but a personal curse. I am a people pleaser. I am the woman who apologizes when someone else bumps into me at the grocery store. I am the daughter-in-law who bites her tongue until it bleeds rather than cause a scene. And right now, sitting in the middle of my living room floor, surrounded by ivory cardstock and satin ribbons, I am a victim in the making. The afternoon sun was filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long, golden shadows across the hardwood floor. It should have been a peaceful moment. My wedding was exactly 7 days away. The house was filled with the scent of lavender candles and fresh printer ink. Yet, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was staring at the seating chart. It was a large foam board, an architectural blueprint of potential family warfare. I had moved the little sticky notes around at least 50 times in the last hour. My hands were trembling slightly as I picked up the pink tag labeled Shanna Miller. "You stay there," I whispered to the empty room, my voice sounding thin and brittle. "Stay far away." I pressed the sticky note firmly onto table 9. Table 9 was perfect. It was situated near the back of the reception hall, close enough to the dance floor to feel included, but far enough away from the head table to prevent disaster. More importantly, it was on the opposite side of the room from table 1. Table 1 was reserved for the VIPs. My mother, my father, and most crucially, my mother-in-law, Evelyn, and her new fiancé, Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a real estate tycoon, a man whose name appeared in Forbes articles and on the sides of skyscrapers. He was intimidating, powerful, and fiercely protective of Evelyn. Then there was Shanna. Shanna Miller was my father-in-law's wife. She was the woman Robert had married less than 6 months after his divorce from Evelyn was finalized. She was a woman who wore designer knockoffs as if they were couture, who laughed a little too loudly, and who looked at every social gathering as a hunting ground for status. I knew I should not have invited them. My gut had screamed at me to keep the wedding small, to exclude the toxicity that Shauna brought with her like a cloud of cheap perfume. But the people pleaser in me had won. Robert was my fiancé's father. After all, how could I say no? How could I be the villain who denied a father the chance to see his son get married? So, I invited them, and now, the dread was settling in my stomach like cold lead. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, shattering the silence. The screen lit up with a photo I had assigned to her contact, a selfie where she was pouting excessively. Incoming call, Shanna. I stared at the phone for 3 full rings, my throat tightening. I took a deep breath, put on my best customer service voice, and swiped right. Hi, Shanna. I was just thinking about you. I lead. The words tasted like ash. Mia, darling. Her voice was shrill, dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my skin crawl. I hope I am not interrupting your little arts and crafts. I just wanted to double check on the menu for Robert and me. You know how sensitive my stomach is lately. Yes, Shanna, I replied, my eyes fixed on the seating chart. I spoke to the caterer yesterday. Your meals are completely gluten-free and vegan, just like you asked, and I made sure they are using pink Himalayan salt, not regular table salt. Oh, good. She sighed, a sound that implied she expected me to fail. You know, at the last gala I attended in the Hamptons, they served this dreadful risotto that bloated me for days. I just want to look my best for your photos. Sweetheart, it is a big day for all of us. Of course, I said, gripping the phone tighter. We want everyone to be comfortable. Speaking of comfortable, Shauna's tone shifted. It became lower, more conspiratorial. Robert and I were discussing the seating arrangements. We are just so excited to finally meet this Arthur Sterling everyone is raving about. Robert knew him vaguely from the country club years ago. You know, we would love to be seated nearby. It would be such a lovely opportunity to Soyud Sing Howling. De dièse est supérieur à reconnect. My blood ran cold. This was it. The trap, actually. Shanna, I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. The seating is already finalized. We have you at a lovely table with some of the cousins. It has a great view of the lake. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A heavy, suffocating silence. Oh, she said finally. The sweetness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp edge. I see. I just thought, since we are immediate family, we would be treated with a little more Saütsinghaling, doi, respect. Being shoved in the back with the distant relatives feels a bit Saütsinghaling. De dièse est supérieur à intentionnel. Mia, it is not intentional. Shanna, I pleaded, feeling the familiar wave of guilt wash over me, even though I had done nothing wrong. Ideally, we mix everyone up so people can meet new. It is fine. Mia, she cut me off, her voice breezy again, but the threat was lingering there. Unspoken, do not worry your pretty little head about it. We will make do. We are just happy to support you, even if we are in the cheap seats. She hung up before I could respond. I lowered the phone, my hand shaking. The room felt smaller. The beautiful afternoon light suddenly seemed harsh and glaring. I looked down at the seating chart, at the pink sticky note on table 9 and the blue sticky note on table 1. They were separated by 3 feet of cardboard. But in that moment, I felt like the distance was not enough. A knot formed in my stomach, a primal warning that something was wrong. Shanna's sudden acceptance was too easy. Her comment about the cheap seats was not a concession. It was a declaration of war. I looked around my perfect living room, at the white tulle and the silver bells, and I realized that I had built a beautiful stage for a play I did not know the script to. I thought I was organizing a wedding, but I had inadvertently invited a predator into a room full of prey. And the worst part? I had given her a front row ticket. Even if she was sitting at table 9, I walked over to the window and looked out at the peaceful street. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever. A mail carrier was delivering letters. It was all so normal, so safe. But inside my house, and inside my head, the storm clouds were gathering. I had spent months trying to make everyone happy, trying to be the perfect bride, the perfect daughter-in-law. But as I looked back at the seating chart, a chilling thought crossed my mind. You cannot please someone who is determined to be unhappy, and you certainly cannot control someone who feels entitled to ruin you. I did not know it then, but the first domino had already been pushed. The game had started the moment I sent that invitation, and I was already losing. The ceremony itself was a blur of white lace, tearful vows, and the soft, rhythmic lapping of the lake water against the dock. For an hour, everything was perfect. The weather held, the sun dipping below the horizon in a spectacular display of violet and burnt orange. Just as we exchanged rings, I felt a sense of relief so profound, it was almost physical. The hard part was over. The vows were spoken. Now, it was time to celebrate. As we stood outside the double oak doors of the reception hall, my new husband, Liam, squeezed my hand. His palm was warm and reassuring. He looked dashing in his midnight blue tuxedo, his smile wide and genuine. Ready for this, Mrs. Thompson? He asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I nodded, smoothing the silk of my dress. I am ready. Let us go in. The heavy doors swung open, and the DJ's voice boomed over the speakers, announcing us for the first time as a married couple. The room erupted in applause. The reception hall was breathtaking. High vaulted ceilings, adorned with twinkling fairy lights, created a canopy of artificial stars. The centerpieces were cascading arrangements of white hydrangeas and eucalyptus, exactly as I had designed them. It was a scene from a magazine, a manifestation of months of sleepless nights and meticulous planning. We walked through the cheering crowd, shaking hands and accepting hugs. The energy was electric. I felt like I was floating. I scanned the room, my eyes dancing over the faces of our friends and family, drinking in the joy. My gaze drifted toward the back of the room, toward table 9. I wanted to do a quick visual check to ensure my father-in-law and Shauna were settled. I wanted to make sure the containment strategy was working. My smile faltered. Table 9 was full of my distant cousins from Ohio. They were laughing and passing a bread basket around. But there were 2 empty chairs. 2 chairs that should have been occupied by Robert and Shauna. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. Maybe they went to the restroom. I told myself, maybe they are at the bar. I kept walking, my arm linked with Liam's, but my eyes were now frantically searching the room. We approached the dance floor, moving toward the head table. Table 1. This was the table of honor. It was meant for my parents, Liam's mother, Evelyn, and her fiancé, the billionaire real estate mogul Arthur Sterling. It was supposed to be a safe zone, an area of elegance and high society where Evelyn could enjoy her evening without having to confront the ghost of her failed marriage. Then I saw it. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heels digging into the plush carpet. There, Sitting at table 1, right next to Arthur Sterling, was Shanna. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. It was wrong. It was visually, geometrically, and socially wrong. Shanna was wearing a cream-colored dress that was aggressively bridal, a shade so close to white it was an insult. She was leaning in close to Arthur, her hand resting casually on the tablecloth inches from his, laughing at something he had just said. My father-in-law, Robert, sat on her other side, looking sheepish but compliant, eating a breadstick as if he were not currently participating in a hijacking of my wedding reception. Liam tugged gently on my arm. Honey, keep moving. Everyone is watching. I leaned in close to his ear, my voice trembling with suppressed panic. Liam, why are they at table 1? Who moved them? Liam glanced at the table and shrugged, keeping his smile plastered on his face for the cameras. I do not know. I thought maybe you changed your mind at the last minute. Mom seems okay with it. I looked at Evelyn. She was sitting on the other side of Arthur, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She was a woman of immense grace, the kind of person who would never make a scene in public. But I could see the tension in her jaw. She was tolerating it. For me. For Liam. No. I whispered, my heart racing. I did not change my mind. I put them at table 9. I glued the tags down myself. Liam. I checked it this morning. Liam squeezed my hand harder, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Well, someone moved the name cards. We cannot make a scene now. Mia, just let it go. We will deal with it later. Let it go. The phrase echoed in my mind, mocking me. We reached our seats at the sweetheart table, which was positioned on a raised platform facing the guests. From this vantage point, I had a perfect view of the disaster unfolding at table 1. I watched as Shanna poured herself a glass of champagne from the bottle reserved for the VIPs. She looked up, and our eyes met across the room. Time seemed to slow down. The noise of the crowd, the clinking of silverware, the music, it all faded into a dull roar. Shanna did not look embarrassed. She did not look apologetic. She raised her glass in my direction, tilting her head slightly. A small, tight smile played on her lips. It was not a smile of congratulations. It was a smirk of conquest. It was a look that said, I am here. What are you going to do about it? I felt a wave of nausea. My mind began to race, spinning through the events of the morning. Had I made a mistake? I remembered the sticky notes. I remembered the foam board. I remembered the feeling of satisfaction when I placed Shanna at table 9. But now, staring at her comfortable posture at table 1, doubt began to creep in. Maybe I was so stressed that I hallucinated doing it. Maybe the wedding planner moved them. Maybe the venue staff made an error. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach, I knew the truth. This was not an accident. This was a calculated maneuver. Shanna had arrived early, found the table cards, and swapped them. She had physically rearranged my wedding to suit her social climbing ambitions. I looked at Arthur Sterling. He was polite, nodding at whatever Shanna was saying, but his eyes were distant. He was a man used to sharks. He probably recognized one in a cheap dress when he saw one, but he was too much of a gentleman to kick a woman out of her seat at a wedding. Shanna knew that. She relied on everyone else's politeness to get away with her rudeness. She weaponized our social grace against us. I picked up my fork, but my appetite was gone. The filet mignon looked like rubber. The roasted asparagus looked gray. Every time I looked up, I saw her hand brushing against Arthur's sleeve. I saw her laughing too loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient conversation like a serrated knife. My perfect day had developed a crack. It was a hairline fracture, barely visible to the guests who were busy drinking and dancing. But to me, it was a gaping chasm. I felt a sense of violation that went beyond just a seating arrangement. It was about control. It was about respect. I sat there, the bride in the beautiful white dress, feeling small and powerless. The inner voice of the people-pleaser whispered, "Just ignore it. Do not ruin the mood. It is just a seat." But another voice, one I did not recognize, was beginning to wake up. It was a colder, darker voice. It whispered, "She thinks she has won. She thinks she can take whatever she wants." I took a sip of water, my eyes fixed on Shauna. She was practically leaning into Arthur's lap now, desperate for his attention. "Enjoy your seat, Shayna," I thought, my grip tightening on the crystal goblet until my knuckles turned white. "Enjoy it while it lasts, because you have just made a mistake. You have stepped into the spotlight, and you have no idea how hot it is going to get." The first crack had appeared, and the dam was about to break. The reception dinner had moved into that lull between the main course and the cake cutting. The clatter of silverware against china had softened, replaced by the hum of contented conversation and the gentle clinking of glasses. From my vantage point at the sweetheart table, I kept my eyes locked on table 1 like a sniper, waiting for a target to emerge. The filet mignon in my stomach felt like a stone. I had watched Shanna for the last hour, and her behavior was escalating from mildly annoying to socially predatory. She had already cornered my mother near the buffet to brag about a non-existent renovation on her house. She had loudly critiqued the floral arrangements to a waiter who was just trying to clear the salad plates. But her primary focus, her obsession for the evening, was Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a man who commanded space simply by existing in it. He sat with the relaxed posture of someone who owned half the skyline, listening intently to my mother-in-law, Evelyn. They were a dignified pair, holding hands atop the tablecloth, existing in a private bubble of calm. Shayna, however, seemed determined to pop that bubble with a needle. I saw her lean in again. She had shifted her chair closer to Arthur, invading his personal space in a way that made my skin prickle. She was animated, her hands flying around as she spoke, likely recounting some exaggerated story about her importance in the local charity circuit. I saw Arthur shift slightly away, his body language screaming discomfort, but he remained polite. He was too refined to tell her to back off. Shauna did not read the room. She never did. She took his silence for interest. I squeezed Liam's hand under the table. "Watch," I whispered. "She is going to do something. I can feel it." Liam Sehil, swirling his whiskey. "You are paranoid." "Mia, look, they are just talking. Maybe she is actually behaving herself for once." As if on qui, Shanna stood up halfway. She was not leaving the table. She was reaching. She was holding her wine glass, a large crystal goblet filled to the brim with a dark, heavy Cabernet Sauvignon. She was trying to initiate a toast. Or perhaps she was trying to tap her glass against Arthur's in a gesture of forced camaraderie. The problem was the centerpiece. The cascading arrangement of hydrangeas and eucalyptus was wide, creating a natural barrier across the table. To reach Arthur, Shanna had to lean her entire upper body over the table, extending her arm to its limit. It happened in slow motion. I think I stopped breathing. Shanna lunged forward, a predator striking Arthur, who was in the middle of turning to answer a question from my father. lifted his hand to gesture. It was a natural movement, not aggressive. Just a man using his hands to speak. His knuckles made contact with Shauna's outstretched forearm. The impact was minimal, a mere brush of skin against skin. But it was enough. Shauna's balance was already precarious. The goblet wobbled in her manicured grip. She gasped, her fingers spasming in a reflex attempt to catch the glass. But she only succeeded in tipping it forward. The liquid launched into the air. It was a dark, crimson arc, a suspended wave of vintage red wine that caught the light of the chandeliers for a split second before gravity took hold. It did not land on the tablecloth. It did not land on the floor. It landed squarely in the center of Shauna's chest, splashing down the front of her cream-colored, floor-length gown. The silence that followed was absolute. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to freeze. The band stopped playing. Forks paused halfway to mouths. All eyes turned to table 1. Then came the scream. It was a sound that did not belong at a wedding. It was high-pitched, guttural, and filled with a rage that shook the crystal glasses on the tables. "My dress!" Shauna shrieked, jumping back and knocking her chair over with a loud crash. "You ruined my dress." She stood there, her chest heaving, looking down at the disaster. The stain was horrific. It looked like a gunshot wound, a jagged, dark purple Rorschach test spreading rapidly across the pale fabric. The wine dripped from the bodice down to the skirt, ruining the illusion of purity she had tried so hard to cultivate. I was on my feet before I realized it. I rushed down from the platform, my heels clicking on the dance floor as I hurried toward the disaster zone. My mind was racing. Damage control. I needed to get club soda. I needed to get her out of the room. By the time I reached table 1, the scene had turned ugly. Shauna was not looking at the stain anymore. She was looking at Arthur. Her face was twisted into a mask of fury, her eyes bulging. "Look what you did," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the billionaire. "You knocked the glass right out of my hand. You clumsy old fool." The guests gasped. A murmur of shock rippled through the room. No one yelled at Arthur Sterling. Not like this. Arthur stood up slowly. He picked up his napkin and calmly dabbed a few drops of wine from his own cuff. He looked at Shauna with eyes that were as cold as icebergs. He did not look angry. He looked bored. "I apologize for the accident, Madam," Arthur said, his voice low and smooth, carrying effortlessly over the whispers. "However, if you had remained in your seat instead of lunging across the table like a desperate fan, your beverage would still be in your glass." Shauna's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She had expected him to grovel. She had expected him to pull out a checkbook right there. Instead, he had publicly humiliated her with a single sentence. She looked around the room, realizing she was losing the audience. People were not looking at her with sympathy. They were looking at her with judgment. She needed a new target. She needed a scapegoat. Her eyes locked on me as I approached. "Mia," she barked, her voice cracking. I stopped a few feet away, my hands raised in a placating gesture. "Shauna, I am so sorry. Let me get some club soda from the bar. We can go to the bridal suite and—" "No," she cut me off, stepping toward me. The smell of red wine was overpowering. "This is not about club soda, Mia. This is about liability." "Liability?" I repeated, the word sounding foreign in this context. "Yes, liability." She gestured wildly at her dress. "Do you have any idea how much this cost? This is a designer piece. It is a limited edition. I paid $1,500 for this dress. Mia, $1,500. My jaw tightened. $1,500? For a dress that looked suspiciously like polyester blend under the reception lights. But I could not say that. Not here. Not now. It was an accident. Shana, I said softly, aware that 200 people were watching us. We can sort this out later. Please, let us just go clean up. She stepped closer, invading my personal space just as she had invaded Arthur's. Her eyes were manic. Sort it out later? No, this is your fault. Mia, my fault? I blinked, stunned. How is this my fault? Arthur has nothing to do with this, she hissed, lowering her voice so only the immediate circle could hear. You are the host. You are the one who is responsible for the safety of your guests. You are the one who crammed us into this tiny table. I stared at her, my mind reeling at the audacity. I did not put you at this table. Shana, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You moved your own seat. You were supposed to be at table 9. There was plenty of room at table 9. Her eyes narrowed. A flicker of genuine malice crossed her face. Are you calling me a liar at your own wedding? She whispered harshly. Is that what you want to do? Mia, you want to humiliate Robert's wife in front of everyone? I looked at my father-in-law. Robert was sitting with his head in his hands, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. He was useless. He was letting this happen. Shana, please, I begged, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Not now. She straightened up, smoothing the stained fabric with a dramatic flair. She turned to the room, assuming the role of the tragic victim. I cannot believe this, she announced loudly, her voice trembling with fake sorrow. I come here to celebrate your love, and I am treated like this? Assaulted, ruined, and then blamed? She turned back to me, her face hard as stone. I expect to be reimbursed. Mia, $1,500, plus dry cleaning, or I will make a scene that you will never forget. She did not wait for an answer. She grabbed her purse and stormed out of the reception hall, leaving a trail of stunned silence in her wake. Robert scrambled up from his chair, muttered a vague apology to the table, and ran after her like a trained puppy. I stood there, alone in the center of the room. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I looked at Arthur. He gave me a small, sympathetic nod, then sat back down and took a sip of water as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. The air in the room had shifted. The joy had been sucked out, replaced by a lingering tension. I looked at the empty chair where Shana had been sitting. A small puddle of red wine remained on the tablecloth, soaking into the white linen like a fresh wound. $1,500. The number echoed in my head. It was not just about the money. I knew that. It was about the power. She had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into a weapon. She had gaslit me in front of my entire family, twisting reality until I was the villain and she was the martyr. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Liam. Are you okay? He asked, his voice full of concern. I looked at him, and for the first time that day, I did not try to smile. I did not try to be the happy bride. No, I said, my voice hollow. I am not okay. I looked toward the exit doors where Shana had disappeared. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. The wedding was over. The party would continue. The music would play. But the magic was gone, and the war had just begun. 3 days had passed since the wedding. They were supposed to be the happiest 3 days of my life. We were supposed to be in a bubble of newlywed bliss, perhaps packing our bags for a tropical island, or simply enjoying the quiet intimacy of our new legal status. Instead, my house felt like a bunker under siege, and my phone was the enemy. It sat on the granite kitchen island, vibrating with a malevolent persistence. Every buzz was a physical blow. Every chime was a reminder that the nightmare at the reception was not a singular event, but the opening salvo of a war I did not know how to fight. I stared at the screen. The notifications were stacking up like debris after a storm. New email from Shanna Miller. Urgent. Reimbursement for damages. New Venmo request from Shanna Miller. $1,500 for dress replacement. New Venmo request from Shanna Miller. $200 for emotional distress and therapy consultation. My hands were shaking as I picked up the device. I unlocked it, my thumb hovering over the email app. I knew I should not open it. I knew it would only poison my blood pressure. But the morbid curiosity of the victim took over. I needed to see the extent of her delusion. I opened the email. It was written in a font that looked like Comic Sans, which somehow made the aggression even more insulting. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 hashes greater than Dear Mia. I am writing this to formally request compensation for the designer gown that was destroyed due to your negligence as a host. As you know, the seating arrangements were cramped and unsafe, leading directly to the incident with Mr. Sterling. I have attached a link to a similar dress for price reference. Although mine was a custom fit, I expect the transfer of $1,500 by the end of the week. If not, I will have no choice but to file a claim with the small claims court. We are family, and I do not want to do that, but you need to take responsibility. Regards. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2. Shanna. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. A hysterical, jagged sound. Negligence? Unsafe seating? She was the one who had physically moved her name card. She was the one who had lunged across a table like a starving animal. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive how she had rewritten history in her own mind to make herself the martyr. I looked at the Venmo request again. Emotional distress. She was charging me for her own public tantrum. My husband, Liam, walked into the kitchen. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that had not been there a week ago. He poured himself a cup of coffee, his movements heavy and slow. Is she still texting you? He asked, not looking at me. I slid the phone across the counter toward him. See for yourself. She is threatening small claims court. Liam. She wants $1,700 total now. She added emotional damages. Liam rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture of profound weariness. He did not get angry at Shanna. He did not laugh at the absurdity of it. He just said, she is not going to stop. Mia, he said quietly, you know how she is. I felt a spark of irritation. This was the refrain I had heard for years. You know how she is. As if Shanna was a natural disaster, a hurricane or an earthquake that we just had to endure. So what do we do? I asked, my voice rising. Do we just pay her? Do we pay her for ruining our wedding reception? Before Liam could answer, his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and winced. It was his father. Put it on speaker, I said. Liam hesitated, then tapped the speaker button. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. Dois Cardinal. Mayor Dad? Robert's voice filled the kitchen. He sounded tired, breathless, like a man who had been running uphill for days. Liam. Son. Listen. I have Shanna here. She is Haling. 2# is greater than she is, really not doing well. She has been crying all morning. She feels very attacked. I gripped the edge of the counter. Attacked? Dad? Liam started, looking at me nervously. She is asking for almost $2,000. I know, Robert said quickly. Look, it is a lot of money, but that dress meant a lot to her. She says it was a gift to herself for navigating some hard times. She just wants to feel made whole again. Liam, she feels like Mia humiliated her on purpose. I could not stay silent anymore. Robert, I said, leaning over the phone. I did not humiliate her. She threw a drink on herself because she was trying to climb over a table to get to Arthur Sterling. There was a pause on the line. Then Robert's voice dropped, becoming hushed and pleading. Mia, please. I know it looked bad, but you have to understand her perspective. She felt isolated back at table 9. She just wants to be part of the family. Look, can you just... Ling. 2# is greater than can you just pay it? For me, I felt like I had been slapped. For you, I whispered, if you pay it, this all goes away. Robert continued, his voice gaining a desperate strength. We can go back to normal. She will calm down. If you fight her on this, Mia, she is going to drag this out. She will make holidays unbearable. She will make birthdays a nightmare. Do you really want to start your marriage with a feud? Just be the bigger person, please. The call ended. The silence that followed was suffocating. Be the bigger person. That phrase was the weapon of choice for enablers everywhere. It was code for let the bully win, because it is easier for us. I looked at Liam. He was staring into his coffee cup. Maybe we should just pay it, he said softly. I felt the ground drop out from under me. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. What? I asked. We have the money in the savings account, Liam said, his voice flat. It is not about the money, Mia. It is about peace. If we pay her, she shuts up. We can move on. I do not want to deal with this anymore. I do not want my dad calling me every day begging. I just want it to be over. My heart shattered. It was a quiet sound, internal and devastating. I realized then that I was completely alone. My father-in-law was a coward. My husband was tired, and I was the only one standing between Shayna and her prize. It is not about the money for me either. Liam, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. It is about the principle. If we pay her, we are telling her that she can do whatever she wants. We are rewarding her for ruining our day. Liam looked up at me, and his eyes were pleading. Mia, please, I am asking you, just pay it for us. Haling. 2. For us. I walked out of the kitchen. I could not look at him. I walked into the living room and sat down on the sofa, pulling my knees up to my chest. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in. The sunlight outside looked gray and washed out. I felt a spiraling sensation in my chest, a vortex of anxiety and helplessness. I was being gaslit from all sides. Shauna was the villain, but somehow I was being made to feel like the problem. If I paid, I was a doormat. If I refused, I was the stubborn daughter-in-law who tore the family apart. I picked up my phone again. The Venmo notification was still there, blinking like a neon sign in a dive bar. $1,500. My finger hovered over the pay button. It would be so easy. One tap, and the phone calls would stop. One tap, and Liam would relax. One tap, and Robert would be relieved. But as I stared at the screen, a new feeling began to rise within me. It was not the soft, pliable desire to please. It was cold. It was hard. It was the realization that peace purchased with extortion is not peace at all. It is ransom. I did not tap pay. Instead, I opened the photos on my phone. I scrolled back to the wedding album. I looked at the pictures of the reception. I zoomed in on the background of a photo taken of the cake cutting. There, in the blurry distance, was table 1. I needed to see it. I needed to prove to myself that I was not crazy, but the photo was too grainy. I could not see the name cards. I lowered the phone, feeling the tears finally spill over. I was trapped. The system was rigged against people who played by the rules. Shauna broke every rule of decency, and she was winning because everyone else was too polite to stop her. I wiped my eyes roughly. The spiral was pulling me down, dragging me into the mud with her. But as I sat there, in the silence of my home, feeling the distance growing between me and my husband in the next room, I knew one thing for certain. If I paid this money, I would lose something much more valuable than $1,500. I would lose myself, and I was not ready to do that yet, not without a fight. The clock on the wall ticked with a rhythmic, maddening precision. It was 4 in the afternoon. The house was empty. Liam had gone to the gym, claiming he needed to blow off steam. But I knew he just needed to get away from me and the toxic cloud that had settled over our marriage. I sat at the kitchen island, a cold cup of tea in front of me, staring at the screen of my laptop. I had almost convinced myself to do it. I had the banking tab open. I had the routing number typed out. I was staring at the transfer button. $1,500. It was a lot of money. But it was the price of silence. It was the ransom for my sanity. I told myself that if I clicked that button, the notifications would stop. The guilt trips from Robert would cease. Liam would smile at me again. We could pretend the wedding was perfect. My finger hovered over the mouse. Just pay it. Mia, be the good girl. Be the peacemaker. Then, a notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was from Facebook. New post in Fairview Community Connection. My stomach dropped. That was our local neighborhood group, a digital town square usually reserved for complaints about barking dogs and recommendations for plumbers. I clicked the notification, my breath hitching in my throat. There, at the very top of the feed, was a post from Shauna Miller. It was a long, rambling paragraph accompanied by a photo of the stained dress. She had used a filter to make the wine stain look even darker, almost like blood. Please pray for me. The post began. I am heartbroken. I tried so hard to welcome my new daughter into the family, but sometimes love is met with cruelty. Not only was I humiliated at her wedding last week by being seated in the back corner like hired help, but when an accident happened involving a guest pushing me, she refused to take responsibility. My $1,500 gown is ruined, but what hurts more is the coldness. Being bullied by the younger generation is a pain no mother should feel. If anyone knows a good lawyer for small claims court, please send me a direct message. I just want justice. I read it twice. The room seemed to spin. Below the post, the comments were already rolling in. Neighbors I waved to at the grocery store were typing things like, "That is awful," "Shauna," and "Some people have no class," and "Sue her. She sounds like a monster." She had not named me. But in a town this small, she did not have to. Everyone knew whose wedding was last weekend. Everyone knew who the new daughter was. She was not just asking for money anymore. She was assassinating my character. She was painting a target on my back for the entire community. My phone buzzed against the granite countertop. A text message from Shauna. I picked it up, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from a sudden, violent surge of adrenaline. Did you see the post? The text read, "The neighbors are very supportive. I would hate to have to name you specifically in the next one. Or tag your employer." I stared at the words. She was threatening my job. I worked for a boutique design firm that prided itself on its wholesome, family-friendly image. A public scandal involving elder abuse or bullying could get me fired. 3 dots appeared. She was still typing. Also, the next message came through. "I heard a rumor about you and that coworker. Mark, from your old job. Remember him? It would be a shame if Liam heard about how close you two really were. Or if I had to manufacture some proof to show him. People believe what they see. Mia, just like they believe I am the victim." I gasped, dropping the phone onto the counter as if it were red hot. It was a lie. A complete, total fabrication. Mark was gay, and we had been lunch buddies. Nothing more. But Shanna did not care about the truth. She cared about leverage. She was threatening to blow up my marriage with a lie just to get her money. And then, a final text. "Transfer the money by 5 this evening, or I call your boss." And then I call the lawyers about getting Robert's share of his mother's inheritance released early. We need the cash. And I am done waiting for the old woman to die. The world stopped. Everything went quiet. The ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic. It all vanished. I looked at the banking tab on my laptop. I looked at the transfer button. For 28 years, I had been Mia, the people pleaser. I had been the girl who apologized for taking up space. I had been the woman who swallowed her anger to keep others comfortable. I had believed that if I was nice enough, kind enough, and generous enough, people would treat me with respect. I was wrong. Kindness to a predator is not a virtue. It is food. Shanna did not want the money because she was poor. She wanted the money because she wanted to see me bleed. She wanted to see me kneel. She wanted to prove that she could walk into my life, defecate on my happiness, and make me pay her for the privilege. I felt something click deep inside my chest. It was not a break. It was a lock snapping shut. The trembling in my hands stopped. My heart rate slowed down to a rhythmic, heavy thud. I looked at the reflection of myself in the dark window of the oven. The woman staring back at me looked different. Her eyes were not wide with panic anymore. They were narrow. They were cold. I reached out and closed the laptop. Saluting howling. "Tu è cancelletto? È maggiore di no." I was not going to pay her. I was not going to negotiate. I was not going to beg. She wanted a war. She wanted to play dirty. She had no idea who she was dealing with. She thought she was fighting a soft, suburban girl who was afraid of a little conflict. She did not realize that by pushing me into a corner, she had stripped away the only thing keeping me polite, my fear of losing approval. I did not care about approval anymore. I did not care if the neighbors thought I was a monster. I did not care if Robert was disappointed. I picked up my phone. I did not reply to her text. I did not block her. Instead, I opened my contact list and scrolled down. I found the number for Evelyn. My mother-in-law, Shanna, had mentioned the inheritance. That was her mistake. That was the slip. She had shown her hand. She was desperate for money, not just greedy. And she was targeting the one person Arthur Sterling protected above all else. his fiancée, Evelyn, and by extension, the family trust. I dialed Evelyn's number. "Hello, Mia?" Evelyn's voice was warm, elegant, and composed. "Hi, Evelyn," I said. My voice surprised me. It was steady. It was devoid of emotion. It sounded like steel. "I need to see you. And I need to see Arthur. It is an emergency. Is everything all right, dear?" she asked, concern creeping into her tone. "No," I replied, staring at the darkened screen of my laptop where the transfer had been canceled. "But it is about to be. I have something you need to see, and I need Arthur to bring his security team's footage from the wedding venue." "The security footage?" "Yes," I said, a small, ruthless smile touching my lips for the first time in days. "Shanna wants to play a game involving evidence. I think it is time we gave her exactly what she wants." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up the cold cup of tea. I poured it into the sink. The old Mia would have reheated it. The old Mia would have worried about wasting it. The old Mia was dead. She had died the moment Shayna threatened to lie about an affair. I went upstairs to change. I put on a sharp black blazer and my highest heels. I applied a coat of dark red lipstick. When Liam came home, he would not find a crying wife begging him to fix things. He would find a general preparing for battle. Shayna Miller wanted $1,500. I was going to give her something else entirely. I was going to give her the truth, and I was going to make sure it cost her everything. My heels clicked with a deliberate rhythm against the polished marble floor of the upscale hotel lobby. It was not a grand hotel, but a discreet, boutique establishment downtown. The kind of place Arthur Sterling favored for private meetings. Evelyn had arranged for us to meet in a quiet lounge off to the side, away from prying eyes. Liam was still at the gym, probably trying to outrun the argument we had not finished. He had called my phone several times, his messages pleading and confused. I ignored them all. My focus was absolute. I spotted them immediately. Evelyn sat elegantly on a plush velvet settee, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, a delicate teacup held between her manicured fingers. Next to her, Arthur Sterling occupied an armchair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes, sharp and assessing, fixed on the entrance. He wore a custom-tailored suit, a man whose presence spoke of quiet power. Evelyn rose, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Mia, dear, are you all right? You sounded rather... So yu ting hao, Ling. 2# is greater than urgent on the phone." I offered a polite, almost imperceptible nod. I was not all right, but I was no longer vulnerable. My smile felt like a mask, meticulously applied. "I am fine. Evelyn, thank you both for meeting me on such short notice." Arthur gestured to the seat opposite him. "Please, Mia, sit. Evelyn tells me you have unearthed something important." I sat, my back straight, my hands clasped loosely in my lap. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I met Arthur's gaze directly. "Shayna has escalated her demands. She is now threatening to spread malicious rumors about me online, and even at my job. More disturbingly, she is threatening to somehow expedite the release of Robert's share of his mother's inheritance, claiming she needs the cash." Evelyn gasped, her teacup rattling in its saucer. "The inheritance? That is, Sao yu ting ho ling, deux dièse est supérieur à scandaleux." Arthur's eyes narrowed, a muscle in his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He looked at Evelyn, a silent communication passing between them. "So, Her desperation has reached this level. Yes, I confirmed, my voice as steady as granite, and she mentioned the $1,500 dress again. Arthur leaned forward slightly, his gaze piercing. Mia, I had a hunch about that dress. I took the liberty of contacting the venue's security manager. He is a former associate of mine. He sent something over this morning. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black USB drive. He placed it on the small glass table between us. This contains the footage from the ballroom's fixed cameras, specifically the angle overlooking Table 1 and Table 9. You said you placed Shauna at Table 9? I nodded. I did. I was meticulous. I even used extra adhesive tape on the name tags. Arthur's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. Good, because what this footage shows will corroborate your memory. Mia, it records Shauna Miller arriving almost an hour before the reception officially began. She approaches the seating chart you so painstakingly crafted. She removes 2 name tags, yours, Mia, and her own. She then, quite deliberately, swaps her name tag with your mother-in-law's, Evelyn's, placing herself directly next to me at Table 1. She then replaces your name tag at a far less desirable table. The words hung in the air, cold and unforgiving. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. She, Humiliating, 2 hash is greater than she moved the tags? Evelyn whispered. She actually did that? My blood ran cold, not from fear, but from a grim satisfaction. I knew it. I knew I was not crazy. The gaslighting had almost worked, almost made me doubt my own sanity. But here it was, undeniable proof. Arthur continued, his voice devoid of emotion. It is all there, time-stamped and clear. She took advantage of a moment of chaos to reposition herself. She wanted access to influence, and she saw me as that access. Then he pushed the USB drive across the table toward me. But there is more. Mia, he paused, his gaze fixed on my face, watching for my reaction. The dress, that $1,500 designer gown. I am quite familiar with haute couture, and when I saw it at the reception, I had my suspicions. It looked Humiliating, 2 hash is greater than off. The fabric, the stitching, even the particular shade of cream. My heart hammered. Tell me, I urged, my voice barely a whisper. Arthur leaned back, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. I had my team do some digging. That dress is not a limited edition designer piece. It is a mass-produced, first-quality replica, a very good one, I will admit, but a replica nonetheless. A replica? I breathed, the audacity of Shayna once again taking my breath away. Indeed, and my team found the exact item online. It sells for Humiliating, 2 hash is greater than $45 on a popular e-commerce site. $45. The words were a hammer blow. $45 versus $1,500. The sheer scale of the lie was breathtaking, he continued, his eyes glinting. Furthermore, the footage reveals something else. When she stood up to lunge across the table, the camera catches a glimpse of the inside of the dress. There, sewn into the neckline, is a small, white tag. It is still attached. The return tag. My eyes widened. The return tag. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. She bought a cheap replica, intending to wear it for our wedding. and then return it for a full refund? I asked, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She was running a return scam? Arthur nodded. Precisely. The wine spill destroyed her ability to return it. So, she fabricated a story about it being a high-value designer piece and demanded compensation from you, not just to cover her perceived loss, but to profit from her own deceit. She tried to turn her misfortune, caused by her own grasping ambition, into a financial windfall. The air in the lounge grew thick with the weight of revelation. Evelyn looked utterly devastated, her elegant composure cracking. To think, Holing, 2 hashes greater than to think. Robert is still with such a calculating, dishonest woman. I felt a new kind of anger blossom in my chest. It was cold, sharp, and exhilarating. It was not the hysterical, panicky anger of a victim. It was the focused, precise rage of someone who had been pushed too far. Shauna had not just tried to extort money from me. She had tried to erase my truth, to dismantle my reality with lies, and to profit from it. And she was willing to burn down my reputation, my job, and my marriage to do it. The image of her smug face at the reception, raising her glass in a toast of victory, flashed in my mind. The false tears, the dramatic performance, the pathetic pleas for sympathy from Robert. It was all a carefully constructed facade, designed to manipulate and control. I looked at the USB drive on the table. It was small, unassuming, yet it held the power to shatter Shauna's entire false narrative. It held the truth. I picked it up. It felt heavy in my hand, like a loaded weapon. Thank you, Arthur, I said, my voice steady. Thank you both. Arthur merely nodded, his eyes acknowledging the shift in my demeanor. You have been placed in an untenable position, Mia. Some people mistake kindness for weakness. It is a common and often fatal error. Fatale, I thought, a grim smile touching my lips. Yes, fatale. The tragedy of it was not mine alone. It was Robert's, for choosing such a woman over his own family. It was Evelyn's, for having to witness this ongoing humiliation. And it would soon be Shauna's. She had built her entire existence on lies and manipulation, believing herself untouchable. She believed she could demand whatever she wanted, simply because she felt entitled to it. But entitlement, when faced with undeniable truth, often crumbles into dust. And I, the once timid people-pleaser, was about to become the dust man. My life was already completely overturned. The fake peace with Liam, the strained relationship with Robert, the constant anxiety of Shauna's threats, all of it had been toxic. Now, it was time to cleanse the wound. There would be consequences. There would be a storm, and I was no longer afraid of it. I was ready to ride the lightning. The drive to my father-in-law's house was suffocatingly silent. Liam sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the passing streetlights, his jaw set in a tight line. He had tried to talk to me earlier, tried to ask why I was suddenly so calm, but I had shut him down. I told him that tonight was about the truth, and if he wanted to save his relationship with his father, he needed to watch and listen. I did not tell him about the meeting with Arthur. I did not tell him about the flash drive burning a hole in my purse. He needed to see it raw. He needed to see the monster without the filter of my explanation. We pulled into the driveway of the colonial-style house that Robert had bought with Evelyn 30 years ago. It used to be a warm, welcoming home filled with the smell of baking bread and the sound of classical music. Now, under Shauna's influence. It felt like a stage set. The manicured hedges were too sharp. The porch lights were too bright. It was a house, trying desperately to look like a mansion. I turned off the engine. My hands gripped the steering wheel for a moment, not in fear, but in preparation. I felt a cold, metallic resolve settling in my chest. The old Mia, the one who would hyperventilate at the thought of conflict, was gone. In her place was a woman who had realized that the only way to deal with a bully was to hit back hard enough that they never got up again. "Ready?" I asked, my voice flat. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and dread. "Mia, please, just do not make it worse. If we can just talk to them calmly. There is no we tonight." "Liam," I cut him off, unbuckling my seatbelt. "There is just the truth, and you are going to decide which side of it you are on." I stepped out of the car into the cool evening air. I grabbed my laptop bag from the back seat. The weight of it was reassuring. I smoothed down my blazer, checked my reflection in the side mirror to ensure my red lipstick was precise, and marched toward the front door. Robert opened it before I could knock. He looked haggard. His face was pale, and he had the nervous energy of a man walking a tightrope. "Mia." "Liam," he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I'm glad you came. Shauna is in the living room. She is 小雨静好Ling. 2# is greater than she is expecting an apology. Mia, please, just keep it civil." I did not answer him. I walked past him into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive, overpowering potpourri, a scent Shauna had introduced to mask the lingering memories of Evelyn. I walked straight into the living room. Shauna was sitting on the beige sectional sofa, legs crossed, sipping a glass of white wine. She was wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my first car, likely paid for by Robert. She did not stand up when I entered. She just looked at me over the rim of her glass, her eyes glittering with triumph. "Well," she purred, setting the glass down on a coaster. "Look who finally decided to do the right thing. I assume you have the transfer ready? Or did you bring a check?" I stopped in the center of the room. I did not sit down. I wanted to tower over her. I wanted to command the space. Liam and Robert hovered in the doorway, looking like two children afraid of getting grounded. "I do not have a check, Shauna," I said. My voice was low, clear, and steady. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, tighter this time. "Excuse me?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "If you are here to give me another excuse, Mia, you can save it. I have the small claims paperwork drafted, and I have the contact information for your boss right here on my phone." She tapped her smartphone on the coffee table meaningfully. It was a direct threat. She was doubling down. Robert stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Now, Shanna, honey, let us not be hasty. Mia is here. That means she wants to resolve this, right? Mia?" I looked at Robert. I looked at the man who had raised my husband, the man who had once been strong and kind. Now he was a husk, hollowed out by a woman who treated him like an ATM machine and a stepping stone. "I am here to resolve it, Robert," I said, not breaking eye contact with him, but not with money. Shauna's eyes narrowed. She sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She sensed that I was not cowering. She stood up, tightening the belt of her robe. "Then why are you here?" she demanded, her voice rising. "To insult me again? To tell me my dress was not worth it? You ruined my property. Mia, you humiliated me. And now you come into my house and refuse to pay? She turned to Liam. Liam, control your wife. She is out of control. Liam looked at me, then at Shanna. He looked torn. His conditioning to please, his father battling with the reality of his wife's anger. Mia, he started, his voice weak. Maybe we should just... No. I silenced him with a sharp gesture of my hand. I walked over to the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. It was the centerpiece of the room, a massive black rectangle that Robert was so proud of. I placed my laptop bag on the coffee table and unzipped it. What are you doing? Shanna asked, her voice shrill. I took out my laptop and an HDMI cable. I plugged one end into my computer and the other into the side of the television. The screen flickered to life, mirroring my desktop. I am going to show you exactly what happened at the wedding. Shanna, I said, my fingers flying across the trackpad. You said I humiliated you. You said I shoved you in the back corner. You said you were a victim. I clicked on the file titled The Reception Cam 04. Shanna took a step back, her face losing some of its color. What is this? Where did you get this? It is security footage from the venue. I explained, my voice devoid of emotion. Arthur Sterling has excellent connections. The video player opened on the giant screen. The timestamp showed 4:15 in the afternoon, nearly an hour before the guests were scheduled to enter the reception hall. The room on the screen was empty, save for the staff setting up the buffet in the background. And there, walking into the frame, was Shanna. The room went deadly silent. The only sound was the hum of the television and the shallow breathing of the 4 people in the room. On the screen, Shanna looked around furtively. She was wearing the cream dress. She walked straight to the large easel holding the seating chart. She stood there for a moment, scanning the names. Then, with a quick, practiced movement, she reached out. We watched in high definition as she peeled off a sticky note from table 1. Then she peeled off a sticky note from table 9. We watched her swap them. We watched her press them down firmly, smoothing them out with her thumb to ensure they looked untouched. She stepped back, admired her work, and then walked away, disappearing from the frame. I hit the pause button. The image of Shanna's hand on the seating chart froze on the screen, a digital indictment 10 feet wide. I turned to face the room. Robert was staring at the screen with his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He blinked rapidly, trying to process what he had just seen. Liam was pale. He looked from the screen to Shanna, his eyes wide with shock. Shanna stood frozen. Her face had gone from smug to varying shades of gray. For the first time since I had known her, she looked small. You moved the seats, Robert whispered. His voice was trembling. You told me, Humiliating, 2 hashes greater than you told me, Mia, put us in the back. You cried for 3 days about how disrespectful she was. Shanna's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an excuse. She let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. Oh, please, she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. That is nothing. I was just Humiliating, 2 hashes greater than I was fixing a mistake. Yes, I saw that the caterers had put us at the wrong table, and I was just correcting it to help Mia. I was trying to save you the embarrassment of having your in-laws at the wrong table. I stared at her, marveling at the speed of her lie. It was pathological. She truly believed she could talk her way out of gravity. Fixing a mistake, I repeated, my voice dripping with ice. by putting yourself next to a billionaire and moving Evelyn, the mother of the groom, to the back corner? Shauna flushed red. Evelyn does not care about these things. She is happy anywhere, and I needed to talk to Arthur about Humiliating. 2 hash is greater than about business opportunities for Robert. I was doing it for this family. She turned to Robert, grabbing his arm. Robert, honey, you understand, right? I was trying to network. We need the money. I was trying to help us get ahead. Mia is twisting this. She is trying to make me look bad because she is jealous. Robert pulled his arm away. It was a slow movement, but it was deliberate. He looked at his wife, really looked at her. Perhaps for the first time, you lied to me, he said softly. You made me call my son and beg him for money. You made me guilt trip Mia. You told me she was a monster, but you, Humiliating 2 hash is greater than you set the whole thing up. Shauna's face hardened. The mask of the victim slipped completely, revealing the predator underneath. Her eyes went cold and black. So what? She spat. So what if I moved a stupid piece of paper? It does not change the fact that she ruined my dress. That is what this is about. She owes me $1,500 for destroying my property. I laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound that surprised even me. Property? I asked. You want to talk about property? I walked back to the laptop. Shauna, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried across the room. We are not done. I minimized the video window and opened a web browser. I had the page preloaded. It was an Amazon product page. I dragged the window to the television screen. The image on the screen was identical to the dress Shayna was wearing in the video. The same cream color, the same lace bodice, the same flowy skirt, but the price listed next to it was not $1,500. It was $45.99. I zoomed in on the price. This is the dress you are wearing. Shauna, I said, it is a mass-produced knockoff from a drop-shipping company. It is made of polyester and nylon. Shauna gasped. That is a lie. Mine is a designer original. I bought it at a boutique in New York. Really? I asked, because Arthur Sterling also noticed something in the video. I switched back to the video player and skipped forward to the moment of the wine spill. I went frame by frame. There, clear as day, as she lunged across the table. The back of her neckline gaped open. I pointed to the screen. Do you see that white tag? Shayna, the one you forgot to cut off? I turned to look at her. She was trembling now. Her hands clutched into fists at her sides. That is a return tag. I said, you kept the tags on. You were planning to wear this $45 dress to my wedding. Impress Arthur Sterling, and then return it the next day to get your money back. But then you spilled wine on it. You could not return it. So you decided to scam me instead. I took a step closer to her. You tried to extort $1,500 from me for a dress that cost less than a tank of gas. You threatened my job. You threatened my marriage with lies about an affair. You threatened to drain Robert's inheritance. And you did it all for $45. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. Robert sunk onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. He made a sound that was half sob, half groan. Shauna stood alone in the center of the room. She looked stripped naked. Her grandeur, her pretension, her upper-class facade, it all lay in ruins at her feet. But she did not cry. She did not apologize. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost admiring. You think you are so smart, she hissed. her voice shaking with rage. You think you can come into my house and do this? It is not your house. Shanna, I said calmly, it is Robert's house, and I think he is finally realizing who he is sharing it with. Shanna whirled around to face Robert. Are you going to let her speak to me like that? She screamed. Robert, do something. She is lying. These are deep fakes. She doctored the video. Robert slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, rimmed with tears, but his expression was one of utter exhaustion. Stop, he whispered. Just stop. Shanna. No, she yelled, grabbing a vase from the side table and throwing it on the floor. It shattered with a loud crash. I will not stop. I am the victim here. I am the one who has been suffering. You are all ungrateful. I deserve that money. I deserve to be compensated for putting up with this miserable family. Liam stepped forward, placing himself between me and Shanna. His face was hard. Get out, he said. Shanna blinked. What? Get out of the house. Liam repeated, his voice louder. You are done. You are done lying to us. You are done stealing from us. Shanna looked at Liam, then at Robert. She saw no allies. She saw no one left to manipulate. The walls were closing in. She let out a scream of frustration, a primal sound of a narcissist who had lost her supply. Fine, she shrieked. I will leave, but you will hear from my lawyer. I will take everything. I will take half of this house. I will take every penny you have. Robert, she stormed past me, deliberately bumping her shoulder into mine. I did not flinch. I did not move an inch. I stood my ground, watching her storm up the stairs to pack her bags. The room fell silent again, save for the sound of Shanna slamming drawers upstairs. I looked at Robert. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a long, terrible dream to find his house on fire. I am sorry, Robert, I said softly. I really am. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. No, Mia, he choked out. Do not be sorry. Thank you. I unplugged my laptop. The screen went black. The evidence was delivered. The confrontation was over. But the aftermath was just beginning. I looked at Liam. He reached out and took my hand. His grip was tight. Let us go, he said. We walked out of the house, leaving Robert to face the wreckage of his marriage. As we stepped into the cool night air, I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom, but I knew Shayna. I knew she would not go quietly. This was not the end. It was just the end of her disguise. The real monster was now loose, and she would be desperate. And a desperate narcissist is the most dangerous thing in the world. The explosion did not happen inside the house. It happened on the front lawn, under the unforgiving glow of the streetlights and the watchful eyes of the entire neighborhood. Shanna did not leave quietly. A dignified exit was simply not in her DNA. 10 minutes after she had stormed upstairs, she came descending the staircase, dragging 2 oversized Louis Vuitton suitcases that I now suspected were as fake as her dress. She was still wearing the silk robe, clutching her purse like a shield. Her face was a mask of smeared mascara and blotchy red rage. Robert stood in the foyer, leaning against the wall for support. He looked like a ghost of the man I knew. He did not look at her. He just stared at the floor, his breathing shallow and ragged. I am leaving, Shanna announced, her voice booming off the high ceilings. I am leaving this house of toxicity. You will all be hearing from my attorneys by morning. I want spousal support. I want damages. I want half of everything. She kicked the front door open. the wood banging loudly against the siding. She hauled her bags onto the porch and then down the steps onto the perfectly manicured lawn. But she did not stop there. She needed an audience. "You are all abusers," she shrieked, turning back to face the house, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that her voice was echoing down the quiet suburban street. "You used me. You treated me like a servant." Lights began to flick on in the houses across the street. Blinds twitched. The neighborhood, usually a fortress of privacy, was waking up to the spectacle. I stood in the doorway with Liam, watching her unravel. It was grotesque, yet I could not look away. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. A white SUV with amber lights flashing on the roof rolled slowly down the street. It was the Homeowners Association Security Patrol. In a neighborhood like this, a woman screaming in her bathrobe on the front lawn at 9 in the evening was considered a level 1 emergency. The vehicle stopped at the curb. A uniformed guard stepped out, adjusting his belt. "Is everything all right here, ma'am?" he asked, keeping a cautious distance. Shayna spun around, her eyes wild. She pointed a trembling finger at Robert, who had stepped onto the porch. "That man is throwing me out," she yelled. "He is abusive. He is stealing my property. You need to arrest him." The guard looked at Robert. He knew Robert. He had waved to him every morning for 10 years. He looked back at Shauna, who was practically vibrating with hysteria. "Mr. Thompson?" the guard asked politely. "Is this woman a resident?" Robert cleared his throat. His voice was weak, but it carried clearly in the night air. "Not anymore," Robert said. "She is leaving. Please ensure she does not damage the landscaping on her way out." Shayna let out a sound that was half gasp, half growl. She looked around and realized that the neighbors were not just peeking through blinds anymore. Mrs. Gable across the street was standing on her porch. Mr. Henderson was walking his dog, pausing to watch. They were all there. The witnesses she had tried to manipulate on Facebook were now seeing the unvarnished reality. She was not the elegant victim. She was the neighborhood disturbance. I saw the realization hit her. For a narcissist, being hated is bearable, but being seen as crazy is a death sentence. She scrambled to gather her composure, pulling her robe tighter, but it was too late. The facade had cracked wide open. "Fine," she spat, grabbing the handles of her suitcases. "I do not want to be here anyway. You people are beneath me." She began to drag her bags down the driveway toward her car, a leased Mercedes that she likely could not afford without Robert's help. The wheels of the suitcases clattered loudly on the pavement, a rhythmic sound of defeat. As she shoved her bags into the trunk, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Then it buzzed again and again, a rapid staccato of notifications. I pulled it out. It was the neighborhood Facebook group, the same group where Shauna had posted her sob story about the dress just hours ago. But the tide had turned. Someone, likely a guest from the wedding who lived in town, had posted a comment under Shauna's thread. "Wait, is this about the Thompson wedding? I was there." She was not pushed. She fell because she was trying to grab the groom's mother's fiancé. It was incredibly awkward. Then another comment appeared, this one from a neighbor currently watching the scene on the lawn. "Is anyone else seeing this meltdown on Elm Street?" She is screaming at the security guard. Yikes. And then, the final nail in the coffin. A comment from a user named Arthur S. It was brief, verified, and devastating. The dress in question was a $45 replica with the return tags still attached. The video evidence has been provided to the family. Any further attempts to extort money or slander the Thompson family will be met with immediate legal action. I stared at the screen. Arthur Sterling did not play games. He had nuked her reputation from orbit with 2 sentences. The comments section exploded. $45? Are you kidding me? I knew she was fake. She tried to sell me essential oils last month and claimed they cured cancer. Oh my God. She is the one who tried to get the homeowners association to ban children from the pool because they splashed her. The sympathy evaporated instantly, replaced by the collective scorn of a community that realized they had been played. The internet is a fickle beast. It loves a victim, but it loves destroying a fraud even more. I looked up from my phone. Shanna was in her car now. She revved the engine aggressively, peeling out of the driveway with a screech of tires that left black marks on the pavement. She sped away into the night, leaving behind nothing but the smell of exhaust and the ruin of her own making. The silence that returned to the street was heavy. The security guard made a note on his clipboard, gave Robert a sympathetic nod, and got back into his patrol vehicle. The neighbors lingered for a moment longer, whispering to each other, before slowly retreating back into their homes. The show was over. I looked at Robert. He was slumped against the doorframe, his face buried in his hands. Liam walked over and put an arm around his father's shoulders. "Come on, Dad," Liam said softly. "Let us go inside." I stayed on the porch for a moment longer, breathing in the cool night air. I looked at the spot on the driveway where Shanna's car had been. She was gone, but more importantly, her power was gone. She could no longer threaten my job because everyone knew she was a liar. She could no longer turn the family against me because they had seen the truth. She could no longer pretend to be high society because she had been exposed as a fraud in a $45 dress. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not happiness. It was lighter than that. It was the absence of weight. The heavy cloak of anxiety I had been wearing for months had simply dissolved. I checked my phone one last time. Shayna's original post on the community page had been deleted. She was already trying to scrub the internet, trying to hide the evidence of her humiliation. But it was too late. Screenshots live forever, and in a town this small, memory lasts even longer. I turned and walked back into the house. The foyer was quiet. The air still smelled of Shauna's overpowering potpourri, but I knew that with time, we could air it out. We could open the windows. We could scrub the floors. We could finally breathe. The silence in the house was not peaceful. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons had stopped firing and the smoke had begun to clear. It was a heavy, suffocating stillness that pressed against my eardrums. The air in the living room still held the faint, lingering scent of Shauna's expensive perfume, a ghostly reminder of the woman who had just scorched the earth beneath our feet. Robert sat on the edge of the beige sofa, his head bowed so low, his chin touched his chest. He was staring at the shards of the vase Shauna had smashed. It was a piece of blue porcelain that had belonged to his mother, one of the few things he had kept after the divorce from Evelyn. Now, it lay in ruins on the Persian rug, a casualty of a war he had not even realized he was fighting until it was too late. Liam was in the kitchen, sweeping up the debris. The rhythmic swish of the broom against the hardwood floor was the only sound in the house. I stood by the window, watching the empty street, my arms crossed tight over my chest. My heart was no longer racing. My hands were no longer shaking. But inside, I felt a strange, hollow ache. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Arthur Sterling. I walked over and tapped the speaker icon. "Arthur," I said, my voice sounding tired even to my own ears. Mia? Arthur's voice filled the room, crisp and authoritative. I trust the situation has been resolved? She is gone, I replied. She left about 20 minutes ago. It was Humiliating, doi, public. I imagined so, Arthur said. There was no mockery in his tone, only the cool detachment of a general assessing a completed mission. My legal team has already drafted a cease and desist order regarding her extortion attempts and the defamation of your character. A courier will deliver it to her registered address in the morning. She is also being formally trespassed from the community by the Homeowners Association Board. Robert lifted his head. His eyes were red and swollen, the skin beneath them sagging with exhaustion. She is really gone? Robert whispered, his voice cracking. She has no choice. Robert, Arthur said, his voice softened slightly, addressing the man who had once been his rival. If she attempts to contact you or Mia again for financial gain, she will be facing criminal charges for blackmail. The evidence is irrefutable. She knows it. There was a pause on the line. Thank you, Arthur, Robert said, the words barely audible. Humiliating. 2# is greater than I do not know what else to say. You do not need to say anything, Arthur replied. Just protect your family. Good night. The line went dead. Robert let out a long, shuddering breath. He leaned back against the cushions. Closing his eyes, he looked older than I had ever seen him. The vitality, the eagerness to please that Shauna had exploited, had drained out of him, leaving behind a shell of a man. I walked over and sat in the armchair opposite him. I did not feel triumphant. I had won. I had saved my money. I had saved my reputation. I had exposed the villain. But looking at my father-in-law, broken and humiliated in his own home, I felt no joy. I am sorry, Mia, Robert said without opening his eyes. I did not answer immediately. I watched a single tear leak from the corner of his eye and track through the wrinkles on his cheek. I let her treat you like garbage, he continued, his voice thick with shame. I saw the way she looked at you. I heard the way she spoke to you. But I was so afraid of being alone. I was so afraid of conflict. I thought if I just gave her what she wanted, she would be happy. And if she was happy, I could pretend I was happy. He opened his eyes and looked at me. They were full of a profound, bottomless regret. I chose a fraud over my own son and daughter. He whispered, I made you pay for my loneliness. The apology hung in the air. It was sincere. It was painful. A week ago, this apology would have meant everything to me. A week ago, I would have rushed to hug him, to tell him it was okay, to smooth everything over, because that is what I did. I fixed things. I absorbed the pain so others did not have to. But I stayed in the chair. I appreciate that. Robert, I said quietly, I did not tell him it was okay, because it was not okay. The damage Shayna had done was real. The cracks she had hammered into the foundation of this family would take years to repair, if they ever could be. She had turned a wedding into a crime scene. She had turned a father against his son. Liam walked in from the kitchen, holding the dustpan filled with blue ceramic shards. He looked at his father, then at me. He came over and sat on the arm of my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. We should go, Liam said gently. It is late. Robert nodded, sitting up straighter. Yes, you should go. You have done enough, more than enough. He looked around the empty, silent house. I have a lot of cleaning up to do, he murmured. We stood up. I picked up my purse, the weight of the laptop inside reminding me of the weapon I had wielded. As we walked to the door, I looked back one last time. Robert was sitting alone in the middle of the vast living room, a small figure in a house that was too big and too quiet. We walked out into the cool night air. The street was dark. The neighbors had gone back to their lives. The drama was over. As I climbed into the passenger seat of our car, I looked at my reflection in the side mirror. The red lipstick was still perfect. My hair was still in place, but the eyes staring back at me were different. They were older. They were harder. I had entered this week as a girl who was afraid to say no. I was leaving it as a woman who knew the cost of saying yes to the wrong people. I leaned my head against the window as Liam drove us home. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. I closed my eyes, but I could still see Shanna's face, twisted with hate. I could still hear the sound of the vase shattering. Victory, I realized, does not taste sweet. It tastes like ash and cold coffee. It is necessary, but it leaves a scar. And as the streetlights blurred past, I knew that while Shanna was gone, the shadow she cast would linger over us for a very long time. 30 days had passed since the night the blue vase shattered on Robert's living room floor. The season was beginning to turn. The humidity of late summer was drifting away, replaced by the crisp, biting wind of early autumn. The leaves on the oak tree outside my office window were starting to bleed into shades of burnt orange and rust. My life had returned to a quiet rhythm, but the cadence was different now. It was slower, deliberate. I sat at my desk, organizing files for a new client. The house was silent, but it was not the fearful silence of a bunker waiting for an airstrike. It was the peaceful silence of a fortress with the drawbridge pulled up. My phone chimed. It was a text from Liam. Dad asked if we want to come over for Sunday dinner. He is making pot roast. I stared at the screen. The old Mia would have typed back immediately. The old Mia would have said yes, even if she was tired, even if she did not want to go, just to make Robert feel better. The old Mia would have sacrificed her Sunday to soothe a lonely old man's guilt, but the old Mia was gone. She had been a casualty of the wedding, buried under a pile of fake designer fabric and lies. I picked up the phone and typed my reply. We can go for an hour, but we are not staying for dessert. I have work to finish. Sayuting 2 Raude ist größer als I hit send. It was a small thing, setting a time limit on a dinner. But to me, it felt like moving a mountain. I had learned that boundaries were not walls to shut people out. They were fences to keep my own garden from being trampled. Robert was trying to make amends. He had started therapy. He had apologized profusely. But trust is like a mirror. Once it is broken, you can glue it back together, but you can still see the cracks in the reflection. We would see him, but on our terms. I set the phone down and walked to the window. Shanna was gone, truly gone. The cease and desist letter from Arthur's legal team had done its job. She had retreated to a condo 2 towns over, likely spinning a new web for some other unsuspecting victim. We heard rumors that she was trying to sue the dry cleaner now, claiming they had ruined a different dress. It was pathetic, really, but it was no longer my problem. However, as I looked out at the peaceful suburban street, I forced myself to confront a hard truth, a truth I had been avoiding. Shanna was a monster, yes, but I had opened the door for her. I thought about the invitation I sent, the one my gut told me not to send. I thought about the months of biting my tongue when she made snide comments about my weight or my job. I thought about how I had smiled when I wanted to scream. I had been complicit in my own abuse. My need to be liked, my desperate addiction to being the good girl, had created the environment where a predator like Shayna could thrive. I had fed the beast with my own compliance, hoping it would eat me last. That was my sin, and that was my lesson. I turned away from the window and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked the same, but her posture was different. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was up. There was a hardness in her eyes that had not been there before. It was not cruelty. It was the steel of self-preservation. I walked back to my desk and opened my banking app. I stared at the balance in our savings account. The money was still there, $1,500. I had almost given it away. I had almost paid for peace that was nothing more than an illusion. I closed the laptop with a soft snap. In the end, the wedding was not the fairy tale I had planned. The photos were tainted. The memories were jagged. But as I sat there in the quiet safety of my home, I realized I had gained something far more valuable than a perfect reception. I had learned that no is a complete sentence. I had learned that my peace is expensive, and I should never offer it at a discount. I looked at the empty chair across the room where I used to sit and worry about what people thought of me. That chair would stay empty. I had paid a high price for this lesson. The stress, the tears, the public spectacle. It had cost me my innocence. But as I took a deep breath and felt the clean, cool air fill my lungs, I knew it was a bargain. I did not pay $1,500 for a ruined dress. I paid it as tuition for my own freedom.